All right, today we're diving into one of the most captivating mysteries of all time, the lost city of Atlantis. For centuries, this story has totally mesmerized treasure hunters, historians, and pretty much everyone in between. But here's the big question. Is it a real place just waiting to be discovered, or is it a brilliant story with a much, much deeper meaning? Let's get into it.
I mean, just think about that for a second. An entire superpower, a civilization at the absolute peak of its power, completely wiped off the map in just one day and one night. That is the incredible, dramatic core of the Atlantis legend. It's this epic tale of power, of pride, and a disappearance so total it's left us scratching our heads for over 2,000 years. So, where in the world does this incredible story even come from? Well, every single ancient mention of Atlantis, and I mean every single one, traces back to just one person, the famous Greek philosopher Plato. Around 360 BC, he's the one who introduces Atlantis to the world in two of his dialogues, Timaeus and Critias. And this is a really key detail to remember. Plato was a philosopher, not a historian. That's going to be a huge deal later on. And Plato wasn't vague about it, not at all. He got really specific. He said Atlantis was located before the mouth that your people call the Pillars of Heracles, which, is what we call the Strait of Gibraltar today. But it's the size he described that is just staggering. An island bigger than North Africa and Asia Minor put together. We're not talking about a little city-state here. This was a continent-sized empire. And according to his account, this was no primitive society. Nope. Atlantis was this mighty naval power that commanded a huge empire. Its capital city was supposedly a marvel of engineering, with these incredible concentric rings of land and water. He says it was ruled by the sons of Poseidon, the god of the sea himself. And then, disaster. In a single terrible day and night of portentous earthquakes and floods, the entire island sank beneath the waves and was gone forever. Now, with a story that vivid and that detailed, you can totally see why people started looking, right? The idea of a lost, super advanced civilization is just too tempting to let go of. For hundreds of years, explorers, researchers, academics, amateurs, you name it, have been absolutely convinced that Plato's story had to be based on a real, physical place. The hunt was on. Okay, so one of the most fascinating modern theories doesn't put Atlantis in the Atlantic at all. It puts it right in Plato's own backyard, the Aegean Sea. This theory is all about a huge, now submerged landmass called the Cyclades Plateau. And what's wild is that the geology actually lines up surprisingly well with Plato's timeline. See, around 9,600 BC, near the end of the last ice age, sea levels were about 400 feet lower than they are today. So according to this theory, the Greek islands we know as the Cyclades weren't islands at all. They were actually the mountain peaks of one single, enormous island. As the ice caps melted, the sea slowly rose, swallowing the plateau. Maybe Plato wasn't describing a sudden catastrophe, but the memory of a gradual one. But the Cyclades Plateau is just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. The search for Atlantis has become a truly global obsession. Seriously, if you've got a map and a pet theory, chances are you can find a spot for Atlantis. I mean, the list of potential locations is just mind-boggling. Some people point to southern Spain, thinking Atlantis was the lost city of Tartessos. Others look at Spartel Bank, which is a sunken island right near the Strait of Gibraltar that actually did sink around the right time. And of course, you've got the classic theory, the Azores Islands in the middle of the Atlantic are the last remaining mountain peaks of a sunken continent. The list just goes on and on. But all of this searching, all of these theories, they're all based on one huge assumption, that Plato was trying to tell us about a real place. So now we have to take a step back and ask a really critical question. What if that was never his goal? What if we're all out here looking for something that was never meant to be found in the first place? And that brings us right to the mainstream academic view. The consensus among most scholars today is that Atlantis isn't history. It's a work of fiction, a myth that Plato completely invented to make a philosophical point. In this view, searching for Atlantis on a map is kind of like trying to find the physical coordinates for Hogwarts or Narnia. To really get what Plato was probably up to, you have to understand a super important concept in Greek culture, hubris. Hubris isn't just being a little arrogant, it's this dangerous, God-defying pride that always, always leads to disaster. And guess what? Towards the end of the story, Plato says the Atlanteans became greedy, corrupt, and arrogant, so their downfall wasn't just some random natural disaster, it was divine punishment for their hubris. So if it is a fable, what's the moral? Well, scholars are kind of split.
On one hand, it could be a patriotic story. In the tale, a small, virtuous, ancient Athens defeats the huge, corrupt Atlantis, which sounds a lot like how the real Athens beat back the massive Persian Empire a century before Plato. But on the other hand, and this is a more popular view, it's a warning. In this interpretation, the corrupt, arrogant Atlantis is actually a stand-in for the Athens of Plato's own time, which he thought was losing its way. The story was basically him saying, "Hey Athens, clean up your act or you'll end up just like them." So we've got these two big camps, team history and team philosophy. But what if they aren't totally separate? What if it's not an either-or question? What if a brilliant storyteller like Plato used the memory of a real catastrophe to make his philosophical fable hit that much harder? This brings us to a really cool middle ground. We know Plato often used real events and myths to ground his arguments and make them feel more real to his audience. So it's totally plausible that he heard stories about a place like the Cyclades Plateau that disappeared under the sea. And he definitely knew about recent disasters, like the city of Helica, which was destroyed by an earthquake and a tsunami just a few years before he wrote all this. He could have woven these real memories of disaster into his story, not to write a history textbook, but to make his warning about pride and corruption completely unforgettable. And that brings us right back to the heart of this whole amazing mystery. Was Atlantis just a philosophical tool, a brilliant fable created to teach a timeless lesson about the dangers of arrogance? Or was it something more? A hazy, distorted memory passed down for thousands of years of a real civilization that was truly lost to time? The answer is still out there. Maybe. Just beneath the waves. So now I really want to know what you think. After hearing all this, where do you land? Are you convinced a real Atlantis is out there waiting to be found? Or do you think it was just a brilliant story with a powerful lesson? Jump into the comments and let us know. If you enjoyed trying to solve this ancient puzzle with us, do us a favor and hit that like button. And for more explainers on lost civilizations, ancient mysteries, and all kinds of historical deep dives, make sure you subscribe and ring that notification bell.